Okay. Can you guys hear me okay? Is that good? Bad echo? Okay, great. Thank you guys for coming. I think we'll have more people come in as we proceed with the 2014 IIDA Career Bootcamp. Thank you guys all for coming this early in the morning. I appreciate it. I see some yawning happening, so wake up. Before I get started, I actually want to just take a picture for social media marketing purposes of you guys. So if you guys could all look super happy and awake like it's 2 p.m., just say, hey, say IIDA. Boom. All right. Write it in, hashtag IIDA20, hashtag blessed. Okay, there we go. So we're going to get started here. I'd like to introduce our distinguished panel up here on stage with us today, which makes me distinguished, so I feel very important. And we'll start with Alyssa. I think you're on.
Is that on?
Yep.
Okay, great. Hi, I'm Alyssa Waymueller, and I'm actually the Director of Interior Design at Helix Architecture and Design in Kansas City. What other information do you want me to include?
Let's say your name, firm, and your education background.
Okay. I graduated from Iowa State University in 2005. Yeah, happy to be here today. Good.
I'm Fred Schmidt, and I'm the Global Director, Practice Chair for Corporate Interiors for Perkins & Will, and the head of the Chicago office interiors practice for Perkins & Will. I have a Bachelor of Architecture and a Master of Architecture, and I graduated in
No dates needed. We don't need that.
Good morning. I'm Jocelyn Stroop. I'm a principal with Canon Design here in Chicago, and I'm the Director of Healthcare Interiors. I graduated many years ago as well, so we won't go there, but I have a bachelor's in interior design from the University of Tennessee in Knoxville.
Hi, I'm Olivia Zabel. I work at Perkins Eastman as a designer. I've been there for about 1.5 years, and I graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Madison in 2011.
Awesome, great, thank you. So we're going to go back down the line, and starting with you, what was the one thing that you remember about design school?
Really late nights, mostly. It was a lot of work, but a lot of fun. We had a fairly smaller group, like 30 of us, and I don't know, I just remember making a lot of really good friendships, but putting in a lot of hard work at the same time, so.
I think for me it was similar. It was certainly the hard work. I felt like we were the only program in school that actually worked hard and didn't have much of a social life outside of class. But it was really great because you really bonded with the people that you were there with. We were all there doing kind of the same thing, and a really great time.
Echo the same things. The intensity of our program, we were really, and it used to drive me crazy because I would see the other kids going home to iron their gym shorts for intramurals, and we would just be going to studio at that time. So it was a lot of work, but it forged a bond with our studio community that still lasts. I'm still in touch with, I'm very close with my friends who live all over the country that I went through that studio process with.
Yeah, I think, not to sound like a broken record, but definitely the people, the classmates that you have that you're sort of forced to love each other because you're in this tight environment for such a long hours. But I think that there's still relationships that I have today with many of those people, and I think that that just kind of that culture and the environment of that studio, and I think some firms try and kind of replicate that, but it's never quite the same as when you're in school. So I think it's something really special that I will always remember.
Great. So now that we know a little bit about your design, background, education, for students today, what are 3 things that you would suggest to them, the 3 most important things they should do or learn in design school today to be successful for the next step in their professional career?
3 things. I think one thing that has always stuck out to me that I've talked with students about too is how much in school that a typical project, the time you spend on a project, the percentage that's all about the design process, and then it's like at the very end there's sort of this scramble to do some documentation and kind of put it all together. Where I think in the real world it's a lot more documentation. And you kind of have to appreciate that side of it too, and you have to love that side just as much as you love the creative, the design, the fun things that we get into this for. But I think there is a reality in what you realistically spend a lot of your time doing. And so I think as much as you can learn to appreciate that in school and really learn a lot, as you go to find a job, people will be looking for both of those skills. Can we go in order so I don't have to think all at once?
Absolutely, yeah.
I would say it's hard to narrow down to 3 things that you should learn in school. That's a
One
terrible,
to 3.
It's a terrible question. I would say problem seeking and problem solving, like understanding the programmatic basis of the problem and focusing on solving it, and not focusing on stylistic, fashion, like, oh, that's a cool lamp, that kind of thing. So I think focusing on understanding the problem, defining the problem, and solving the problem will really advance your actual design thinking. The other skills, I think, do come later in terms of coming up with design concepts, and then being able to represent it graphically is obviously very key. But the very, very first thing is learning how to understand and identify and solve the problem.
I think one of the really important things that you need to be able to do is to be able to clearly articulate your design, to be able to state why it is you've designed what you have, and to be able to present that in a clear manner. The other thing I think that happens, because you've got so many fabulous tools available to you with technology, to be able to create fabulous renderings, very photorealistic renderings, is what I see in portfolios all the time. And it needs to be more than just a picture of a space. It really needs to represent 3-dimension very carefully, and you need to think about how do you solve those problems when you think about it beyond just what that image might look like. Think about the space in reality, if you will, and make sure that what you're designing in that view is something that really can be accomplished.
So I'm going to say something a little more technical. I think it's important to learn Revit, especially at our firm. I know that's something that we're always looking for when we're looking for candidates to work there. And if you have a chance to take a class and just learn it before you try to find a job, then I think you'll be better off for sure. It's a good program to know.
Great. So I went to the Harrington College of Design. Do we have any Harrington people here today? Nobody? Oh my gosh, that's insane. Yeah, we got one? Yeah, way to go. So I graduated actually last summer with my master's in interior design, and what was a great part about Harrington is that they really had an interdisciplinary program where, of course, we had a focus in interior design, but I really got a crash course in graphic design and web design. And I see more and more those 3 disciplines, not just those, but multiple disciplines converging in a lot of our workplaces today, a lot of our design firms today. So I wanted to ask you, the panel, how important is it for students and emerging professionals to have that interdisciplinary skill set and to wear a lot of different hats? How important is that? How integral is that to your firm?
I think it depends on the firm. For example, like where I work, I've done things with graphic design minimally. There's a few people that I work with that do more of that, but I think it's always useful to know all the different facets of it. Like graphic design is always useful, like Photoshop, InDesign, but also being able to obviously do the design part too. It's always useful to know as much as you can, I think.
I would say that having a very interdisciplinary background is an important skill set to have. Bringing the ideas forward, like you're talking about with graphic design, are an important element that is part of interior, and it needs to really be thought through thoroughly. We have a lot of people in my firm who have a lot of varied backgrounds. They come from initially theater background, or they might have lighting design, they might be nursing background, and then have gone into interior design as a kind of a second degree. So everybody brings a really different sort of perspective to the table, and I think that just adds to the whole richness of what it is that we do as a practice.
I second that. And we were talking even just prior about our college days. And if you've changed majors, or or if you had a previous degree, that's not a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. It makes you broader in your perspective. We like to look for people that have a hungry eye and a hungry mind that are looking and maybe going down some crazy roads that are not really going to come to fruition in your career, but it just shows us that you're exploring things and exploring ideas, taking courses, and getting outside your, the straight path of the interior design education. So whether it's true interdisciplinary, like you're getting another degree, or whether you're just sort of sampling from the salad bar, I think it's good to get interests all around the university and all around us. So.
I would absolutely agree. I think especially graphic design, that ability to very cleanly, it is articulating the design and how you present things. And I helped with a student semester at K-State a year or two ago, and I was so surprised that some of the designers had these wonderful, wonderful projects, but then the way they presented it, just graphically, it was so cluttered and it didn't reflect what the design was all about. And I think, so having that eye for being able to create those presentations, and that is learning some of those graphic design skills, I think that also gives you an appreciation. A lot of every day I work with graphic designers too on a lot of our projects that are doing environmental graphics and signage, and it gives you an appreciation for what they do. It gives you a better understanding of how to work better together, and so I think it's a really important crossover in general. Yeah.
Those are great answers, and I'll just continue on that path a little bit. I actually read an article recently that talked about the quote-unquote generalist, and how in the past being a generalist was sort of thought of as a negative thing, as in you're stretched too thin. But my first career was in marketing and advertising, and then I switched to interior design, and I sort of thought, oh my gosh, I wasted 2 years in marketing and advertising before I found what I really wanted to do. But it was wonderful that I have that pool of knowledge in marketing and advertising. I think a lot of people have those different nodes of knowledge, and certainly embrace those. Embrace how wide-spanning you might be, because all those things are going to help you bring a different perspective to a design firm and to your team. So embrace the generalist part of you. I think that's a big thing nowadays. And sort of switching gears a little bit, what are some things, some do's and don'ts on your resume or portfolio that you would suggest to students today to do or not do?
I think having a very clean and simple design, it shouldn't necessarily be the most important thing. But I was so surprised right out of school. The very first year I went to a career fair at Iowa State on behalf of the firm I was working for, and I went back to our director of design with a stack of resumes that I'd gathered, and I was all excited to sit down and talk with her. And this is how fast she went through them. Run this pilot. And so it was that initial look of how well you can clearly communicate your design aesthetic, and everyone that had these bright colors and all this stuff happen, so busy, she could immediately tell this isn't somebody we want to work with. And so I think it's sort of horrifying to hear, because as students you spend so much time working on those, but I think just to make it as clean, simple, precise, the basic, the information that's really important to you, don't overthink it as developing your own logo and adding so much to it. I think that that simplicity is so perfect, because you're communicating right from the start your understanding of good design.
Could not agree more with everything you said, and we do go through the resumes just about that fast. And I would say that you should, for the cover letter and portfolio, cover letter, resume, portfolio, number one, should all be coherent as a package. Number two, it should be, if you're applying to, in the contract interior design industry, it should look like contract interior design. It should look business-oriented, but still with design. So the kinds of firms that are represented up here today, look at their work, look at their website, look at their graphic presence, think about how they present themselves. Think about the sort of notion of Swiss style of graphic design, if you will. Very clean, very smart use of typeface, and sort of guide your portfolio and your materials that way. The cover letter should be very brief, like super brief. What's your name, what's your school, what's your degree, when do you get out? You got some major thing you want to tell us, like you interned in Chicago once before or something like that? Or you're very interested in healthcare or whatever that is? Put it on there, but keep it short. Do not write this big Shakespearean thing about design is the most wonderful thing of all things, and that is the thing that is design.
Design is truth.
Right, exactly. Stop it. So I would say that on your cover letter, super to the point. On your resume, you know, it sounds really basic, but we've seen resumes without names. We've seen resumes without phone numbers. We still make sure you got your contact information. I do think that for anybody, but particularly for young women, it's okay to not put your home address, you know, because that's, you never know where that resume might end up someday. So I think it's okay to say where you're from and here's your email address, but you don't need to feel obliged to say that I'm in apartment 8F. You know, so I would think about that. Put your degree right up front, not at the bottom, right at the top. State your degree exactly the way it's going to be stated on your resume. Don't say, oh, I have a bachelor's of interiors. Is that what it's called on your thing? I don't, on your resume, on your diploma? I don't think so. So I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Architecture. I have a Bachelor of Science in Interior Design. What exactly does it say? What exactly is the name of your program? What is exactly the name of your university? And when is the date that you graduate or anticipate graduating? And people try to be coy and leave that off, and maybe you'll be fooled into thinking that you have 20 years experience. So put all that right up front. If you have any internship or work experience in the profession, even if you was a receptionist over Christmas holiday somewhere, put that at the top of your resume because it shows some experience in the profession. And you say, oh, I worked at Flerman and Blerman in Ohio. I don't know who Flerman and Blerman are, but I think, hey, okay, she worked somewhere. She, you know, she's been in an office. She filled out a time card. She's got had a bite at the apple. So I put that stuff up first. If you've worked anywhere, which sad to say, many of your generation have not, I would put that down. Whether you've worked at Dairy Queen, or you were a nanny, or you cut lawns, or you did whatever, because it shows that you've worked for money, and it shows that some of those jobs are customer contact, that you've had to deal with the public, you've had to speak, you've had to be in front of people. That can be very informative, so I would include that. Don't feel embarrassed because, like, well, I'm just in school, I don't have a big giant long resume. Well, of course you don't, you're in school. So it can be very brief. Hit the basic points and highlight those and go from there. And we talk about portfolio later?
You can talk about it now if you want to, go for it.
Do you mind if I keep going? Portfolio, same thing, keep it clean, keep it brief, put your best work in. Don't, you know, if you look back at a project you did 2 years ago and it was a good project, but your graphic skills are better now, there's no law that says you can't go back and work on it again. It's still you. So if you got time over the summer, you still don't have a job, improve your work, improve your portfolio. So clean it up, put your best work in, keep it brief. To your point, if you're putting in graphic views, those views should tell a story. You should be able to look at those things and tell a story about that. You know, it used to be, you know, back in the day when everything was done by hand, we talk about a person's hand, their drawing, their lettering skills. You could look just at their hand, not their physical hand, but you could look at the quality of the hand on the page and judge within 10% how many thousand hours they've spent in the studio. You can't really do that anymore at first glance. So some people will put hand drawings in their portfolio because some teacher told them put hand drawings in. But you know what, if your hand drawings are terrible, and you know it if they are, don't put them in because your other work will look fabulous, and then I get to that drawing and I'm like, what, did this person just start yesterday? What happened? So, so if your hand drawings are good, and many of you are, and we're good in art in high school, if you got good quality hand drawings, and graphics and diagrams and lettering, include those pieces. But if it's really clumsy and you don't even understand the basic laws of perspective, don't put those terrible sketches in. It will hurt you. So.
Well, I agree completely with, you know, the things that have been said. I think the idea of keeping it simple and straightforward and to the point are really key, because we really don't have a lot of time, sadly, to spend poring over exhaustive, you know, materials. It helps a lot to include work samples with your resume and cover letter as well, because it gives us a good idea of you know, what you're capable of doing. That does not need to be large. Just a few images of some of the work that you've done is really helpful. And pay attention to the details, kind of like what Fred was saying. Make sure the information's accurate, that it's well composed, because that's what this industry is all about. It's about the details. As far as portfolio is concerned, I do like to see hand sketches, but I agree, if it's not your best work, you shouldn't have it there. You don't feel compelled to put every single thing you did the entire time you were in school in your portfolio. Put in the best stuff that you have, because most of the time, quite frankly, if you do end up meeting with someone for an interview, we may not have a whole lot of time to spend with you either. Don't be offended by that. It's just sort of what happens. But you want to be able to get the best stuff out there as, you know, right off the bat and go right there with it. You don't have to go chronologically through your materials. Just start with the best stuff, and if the other stuff you have time to talk about, then that's great.
So I agree with everything that everybody said as well. Something to add in about portfolios, I think it doesn't need to be really text heavy, like maybe to keep it to images, and then they can be talking points for interviews, and like people aren't going to sit there and read every single thing that you write. So just keep it clean. Yeah, keep it simple. I would agree with everything.
Excellent. Those are great answers, really. And I think the good thing about coming to this event today, you're getting wonderful perspectives from people that are in different stages in their career, so they're all seeing different things. So you're getting really like rich answers right now. So I appreciate that. Thank you. So we've talked about portfolios, resumes. Those are sort of the written graphic parts of yourself that you're giving to a firm. In terms of professional networking, your physical self, your physical resume. I was at an IIDA networking event recently, and a design student came up to me and asked, who's the most important person to meet here? And I thought that was a really good question to ask. Me just being an IIDA staff member, that she networked through me to get to somebody else that she should meet as a young designer, just to say hi, hello, maybe get her name across, and learn a thing or two during that brief conversation that she might have. I wanted to ask you, what are some important questions, not any specific amount of questions, but what are some really crucial questions you can ask at a networking event that a student attends?
Ask as a student?
Ask as a student, yes.
Okay.
And you can say pass if you want to skip it for a second and give it to the next person if you want. We can come back to you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to think about that for a second.
So you're talking about an event that's with professionals?
Yes.
Okay. I think it's important to try to understand some things about what's going on with business in that particular city or region where the event is being hosted. You know, try to understand, you know, what kind of work people are doing, where they see the industry going, where they might see opportunities that are out there for young designers. You know, just kind of ask some of those kinds of questions. You can certainly ask if you know of anybody who's hiring. I don't think it's nothing wrong to ask those kinds of questions as well. But I think it's just really important to make those personal connections, because those really do get you a long way. I'm a huge believer in the power of networking.
Agreed, but certainly a good rule for networking, and also a good rule in life, and a good rule if you're at a dinner party, or you know, whether you're a student or not a student. But ask people about them. What do you do? What does your firm do? How is that? Do you have any other offices? What do they do? So if you get them talking about themselves, they're going to think you're fabulous. So number one, get people talking about themselves. And then when you make a connection and they're starting to feel comfortable with you, then you can ask more directed questions like, are you guys hiring? Or do you know of anybody who is? But I think if you just come up cold, ice cold, and say, hey, are you hiring? Can you hire me? Right off the bat. That would be a bad approach, right. But asking about them and their company is a much better way to get them warmed up.
I would agree, and I think that sometimes understanding that a network, there's a lot of different parts of a network that are important. I think you walk into a room and you want to meet that senior principal that could hire you, but the furniture rep that person knows really well, that you might not think, well, I don't necessarily want a job in furniture, but they have an important connection. And when you make an important connection with this person, they might say, you know who I was just talking to that would be a really good. So I think always following up with, when I first was looking for an internship, someone had recommended I talk to a furniture dealership, and I had no interest of working there, but I went ahead and gave him a call. We had this great half-an-hour conversation all about, from her perspective, the different firms in Kansas City and what I should be looking for. And based on a couple of exactly who she told me to call at each firm, I followed up with some of those and ended up getting an internship because of that. So I think don't underestimate some of those people within a network that it might not be somebody you want to work at that firm, but they have a huge network that they've built around them that they can then pass on to you.
I guess I just want to add one other thing to add on to what you're saying, which is 100% true, and that is it's not getting a job or getting your career lined up is not a sniper shot. You can't just figure out who's the one person here I need to talk to, and I'm gonna go talk to that lady, and then I'm gonna get my job and my career will be fixed. It's more like it's a scatter shot, and so you really need to meet, and to your point also, you might not meet the senior principal there, but maybe a mid-level designer, and you make a great connection with that person, and they tell the principal some later day, I met a really interesting candidate. So what I always tell folks is to really have to get out there and talk to everybody, even people that don't seem like they're meaningful in your career search, in the furniture companies and reps, construction companies, etc. And as it pertains to job seeking, I always tell people to really press every button on the machine and talk to everybody and call everybody. And people, and particularly young folks, are reluctant to do this, but call in call somebody and say, listen, my uncle told me he knows you, or what. You just don't be, you have to be bold. You have to be unafraid to approach people and try to engage and ask to just talk to them. You're not necessarily asking for a job, but just ask an informational discussion, learn a little bit about their company, talk a little about your own career. Maybe you can give me some advice. If they like what they see, maybe they'll hire you.
Did you have anything?
So I know people that have, kind of feeding off of what they said about me talking to everybody. So you meet a lot of people like furniture reps, and those people go to all different design firms, and they just know who's hiring and all of that stuff. And even if there's not anyone hiring now, they might remember you later. And so it's always just to start up conversations with everybody.
Great. So a student has an apprenticeship, an internship, or even a full-time job. They're in the workforce now. One crucial mistake I made when I first started out in my professional career is that I wore ripped jeans to work one time. And my boss brought me in and said, Kyler, you're an idiot. You can't wear ripped jeans to work. And he was absolutely right. And so I wanted to ask you, and Fred, you kind of touched on this about having customer relations experience. And this is not even really a design thing, but being a just overall professional. What are some key things to remember in terms of professional cues that you all know now well, that are sort of ingrained, but for a student coming in, some of those things are just not known. What are, to give them sort of a step ahead, what are just some key professional cues that you would want to have them remember when they first enter into a job?
I think it's important, like when you talk to people, to make eye contact with them, to just like at work or
at work. It can even be outside of work. Just some professional things, just how to be a professional at work.
Okay. I think it's just important to remember to represent yourself in a positive way and know that you're representing the company that you work for as well when you're out at events and things like that. It's kind of like, it's kind of hard to explain.
Yeah, that's all right.
I don't know. Sorry.
So you can pass it to Jocelyn if you need to.
Can I pass this?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think in the office, it's really important, certainly, to be professional, but to display a real interest in what's going on in the office. If you're working on a project with someone, it may not be the most exciting assignment that you have at that moment, but be curious about why you're being asked to do what you do, engage in discussion with others in the office, partake in the events that are going on in the office, whether educational events, other things, to try to absorb as much information as you can. The other thing I would say is that in this industry, we have so many social events that come along. Neocon certainly is full of those, but throughout the year, there's many, many things that happen. This is a place where you really do need to maintain that professionalism, because it certainly could be an environment that might make you think it's a big party, and maybe you're back in college again. But you're not. You're representing yourself, you're representing your firm, and you need to make sure you maintain that level of professionalism outside the workplace too.
Boom.
Mic drop.
Absolutely agreed. And we have lots of social events, and they're fun, and everybody likes to party, and I like to party. So let's party. But absolutely true. You are surrounded by people that you work with, or that you may someday work with, and you don't want to be that guy or that girl that they remember from that party when that thing happened. So, so that's key. As it pertains, you asked about, we were talking about ripped jeans or whatever. I would say, I don't think there's a huge amount of emphasis on dress codes in our profession anymore, but I hope. But on the other hand, I would say that you have to keep it. You have to keep it clean. You have to keep it neat. I've told this. I do a lot of student talks, and I told this story many, many times. A young woman who had every single thing going for her, resume, her presence, and all that. And yet she wore like a khaki-colored or cream-colored blazer to the interview, and it was filthy. And I don't mean she brushed up against a car on the way into the meeting. I mean it was filthy from end to end, and I couldn't stop thinking about it the entire time. So, clean, pressed, professional presentation. No one expects you to show up for an interview in an Armani suit, and in fact, if you do, we'll be wondering like, what's that all about? So. Just basically clean press shirt and even a clean pair of jeans or whatever, but just be presentable and fresh and alive. Other cues, you made like looking people in the eye is a big one, as you mentioned, smiling, being awake and alive in interviews. When you go to an interview in particular, it is your chance to talk, and it's your chance to tell the story of me. And so whatever question you get asked, don't just answer yes, no. It's your turn to expound a little bit. Yes, I did take some other classes, and the ones I took were, I studied Italian, and the reason is I'm half Italian, and I always wanted to speak Italian, and I went to Italy, and I don't know, I'm making this up, but tell some stories, use each question as a way to illuminate a little bit about you, and make that meeting more meaningful. And not everybody is a big talker. It's okay to be a little bit reserved. You don't have to light up the room, but it is your chance to talk about you. And if you miss that chance, well, then you miss that chance. So.
I think that, it's a lot of just professionalism. I think it's just the basics, that your parents taught you. I think it's being polite. I think it's being cordial, treating people with respect, respecting their time, just keeping those in mind. And to echo what everyone said, I think especially at a lot of we are a very social group of people, and so always remembering that it's okay to have fun, but that needs to come second to doing what you do well. I think I've also found, I have a mentor that I really respect. I just think the world of her, and I think anytime I get into a situation that I am unsure of what's the right thing to say here or wear to this or whatever else, I think of her. What would she do? What would she wear to this? Okay, that's what I should wear. And so it's just thinking about finding someone like that you respect and you think you can tell that they are very professional, they're very well respected in the community, and that gives you a good example, because sometimes it's unsure to figure out how to handle certain situations, and so you can kind of use that, what would they do? And I think that's always helped me with situations that I wasn't sure about.
And Alyssa, how did you connect with your mentor initially? How did you meet her?
I met her actually, I worked for her. She hired me at a previous firm, and then she actually left that firm, but we've remained very close. I think we just connected personality-wise, but it's just been this great relationship that I feel like she's a close friend, but I also feel like she's kind of my honorary big sister, and that she's also a leader in our design community, and so I know I can go to her with any kinds of questions, and I think she appreciates that I will sometimes go to her with a lot of questions, and I'll text her, say, hey, can we have coffee? And then I just, this came up, and I just want to know what you think of this. And almost now, since we don't work together anymore, it's easier to have some of those conversations. But I really encourage you to try and find that person that you just click with. And I think most people enjoy mentoring. I mean, as much as they love to have a mentor, I think people also, I think it's good to find someone like that that's willing to pass on that information and help you. And does that answer that question?
Yeah, it does.
Is that good? Yeah.
Okay, great. And I'll add one more thing onto that about just professional cues. Make sure that you don't have sort of a privileged attitude of this task is too small for me. Welcome any task. If it's making copies, you do it, and you do it enjoyably and do it voluntarily. I think a lot of, and maybe you guys see this with young people, quote unquote, the millennials, is that one thing is that, we sometimes think we're above a task, and that's sort of a mass generalization of our generation, but that's one thing that often I've seen is that, people that just start out are just like, I shouldn't be doing that. That's not part of design. Always to embrace those, even if it's a monotonous task, to do it. And it's just part of it's part of the job. Yeah, go for it.
I just want to tack one thing onto that, and not to pick on any one generation, because each one is funny in its own way. Yeah. But I would say that one thing that's worth noting is if you go into like software development, you can be 22 and invent the world's coolest software, and you could be the smartest person at the company at 22. But in our industry, it's actually not an industry, it's a profession. And in any of the professions, whether it's medicine or law or design or accounting or any of the true professions, they are guild-based. You learn at the elbow of a master, and that's silly to talk about it because we don't work that way, but you learn at the bottom, and you learn incrementally, and there really is no shortcut for that, and there really is. There's no way around it, and so some of those menial tasks are just that. They are, in fact, menial, but that's what you do when you're an apprentice in the shop, and then you move your way up, and you work your way up. And what happens is you'll be doing one menial and useless and stupid task after another until finally one day they hire someone more junior than you, and you'll realize, hey, I know stuff. I'm starting to get the hang of this. It's like growing your hair out. You don't feel it growing, but then one day you realize you need a haircut. It's the same way. You're working and working and working, and then one day you realize, I'm starting to have a little experience. I've done this before, and I'm starting to get the hang of this. It's incremental.
And I think at the most successful workplaces, the people that are higher level, the quote-unquote masters, they're not afraid to do the menial tasks either. They'll do it. They'll do it just as voluntarily as the person who's just starting out. I think when the whole firm or whatever company that you work for embraces that attitude, just makes for a much more fluid and cooperative workplace. And so I wanted to transition talking about workplace. Describe, if you could, and this is kind of a two-part question, what design firm culture is like, and how an individual should align themselves to a firm in terms of as this is kind of a off-base example, but when I was looking as an undergrad, when I was coming out of high school at schools, I was looking for schools that I was the most comfortable at, that was most adaptable to my personality. What sorts of things within firm culture should you look for to align yourself with that so you can hopefully be the most happy there? And if you don't want to start, Fred, you just pass it on down.
A difficult question, I think, because every situation is very, very different. I would say, to the points that have been made, participate in all the activities that are there and try to be a positive energy and a positive force in the culture, and good things will happen to you. I would say that in some studios or some companies, there's going to be always some degree of chatter and maybe some negativity or snarkiness, and that maybe gets attractive, particularly while you're standing there making copies. But you know what? Don't drink that water and don't get involved with that stuff, because it will hurt you karmically. It hurts the company karmically. And I will also say there are no secrets in the studio. Everybody knows what everybody's up to, including the boss. And they may or may not call you on it, but they see and they hear and they know. So just keep it real, keep it clean, and everything will be all right.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that in my career, I worked in a couple of different types of firms. I worked for a firm that was interior design only firm doing contract interiors, and then moved from that to working for an architectural practice that had interior design within the practice, and which is the model that I work in today. They vary widely in terms of the way that they interact with the interior designers in their offices. I think it's important to understand what is the relationship between architecture and interior design within a multidisciplinary office. And I would encourage you to make sure that you clearly understand what your role will be, how you interact professionally with each other, how much collaboration occurs within the studio, how much interior design mentorship is there in that office. I would say to you, if you're walking into an architectural firm and you're the only interior designer in that practice, probably is going to be a challenge for you, unless you really, really are willing to take on a lot. So despite how much we collaborate professionally, there is still a lot of issues that might occur in certain firms if they really are not embracing interior designers fully as peers and as true professionals. I think that in my office we work very collaboratively. We sit next to the architecture team members. We work as teams, very team-based. We also work in our setting with other offices. We're multi-office firms, so we work with other offices quite frequently. So I think you need to understand the model that the firm is working under, and is that something that you want to be a part of, or would you rather be in a small office where it's a lot more hands-on? When you work in a smaller practice, which I have done before as well, you often get the opportunity to do a lot of different things instead of just one singular thing for a while and then move on to the next. So I think it's just important to understand the differences between those and try to find something that fits well for your own personality and what your aspirations are for a career.
Also, in terms of office culture, I think it's, if you're someone that likes to be involved in a lot of different things, I think it's important to find out if the firm that you're looking at supports those kind of activities. Like, for example, if you need to leave the office to go do something for IIDA or participate on a committee or something. I know the firm that I work at is very supportive of that, and the balance between working and then going to things like that. And also, I've only worked at one firm, so I just know how it is there, but we do things to kind of get everybody doing things outside of the office. We did a 5K a couple weeks ago, and we'll do a chili cook-off during the summer, and just events like that. It kind of keeps the morale in the office up, and it's fun to do things with people outside of work so that you can I think it helps with your working relationship too. I mean, sometimes.
Great. Alyssa, did you want to? Yep. Go ahead.
I think that one other thing I would add, and it's don't make a decision about this career and the path you've chosen based on one firm. I had worked at one firm for about 6 years, and really into the 5th year, I was so frustrated. I was really frustrated with the projects I was working on, with some of the leadership I was working with, just the culture of the kind of the vibe of the office. I really was unhappy and was convinced I picked the wrong career in some ways. I'm like, I think this is a mistake. I need to go back to school. I need to reconsider this. And I think everybody probably has a day where you think that. But I really thought this was a mistake I had made. And then an opportunity came along at a different firm, and it was amazing that within a week, I'm like, oh no, I was in the wrong place. I love this career. I'm so glad I picked it. And when you're with the right people, and so, and actually I just was talking to a young person that had been at a firm for about 2 years, same thing. She was applying at nursing school and was ready to check out completely. I'm like, please just give another firm, even on contract basis, but just experience at least one other place to see that firms are so drastically different, that I think to make a very huge decision like that based on one environment is a bad mistake. So just give it a chance, and it's okay, I mean, to try out a different firm and just get a feel for it that way.
Great. And so as I said before, each of you are at very different stages in your respective careers. What steps or what things are you doing today for you personally to grow as a designer?
Well, IIDA did not pay me to say this part, but I've said that I think at this point in my career, being involved with IIDA is one of the most important things I've done. Within Kansas City, I spent a couple of years on committees, planning events, working on a few different things, and then was our city center director, and I'm now the Mid-America chapter president. And that has allowed me to, there's so many skills that I have learned that I wouldn't have necessarily learned in my, at work. The relationships that I've made, the opportunities that I've had, I mean, I just wouldn't have changed that, and I think it's the perfect time that I've gotten to feel like I'm growing so much, and so it's not necessarily something in the office I'm doing, but it's something that's just completely valuable, and I would really recommend to everyone.
I would say in the last year I've taken on this role as a practice chair. And so for me, the biggest challenge and the biggest growth has been trying to coordinate across many offices, many people, and all very senior and all absolutely convinced they know exactly what they're doing. So that's been my big growth challenge in the last year, not so much on an individual design, project design basis, but in more management stuff.
Can you describe what a practice chair is for those that don't know?
Our firm has multiple sites. We have 24 different offices, and each office has a head of interior design, and so then one person is the chair of that. So I coordinate with all the heads of interior design with all the other offices, and in terms of pursuits and new things that are coming down the line in terms of our knowledge management, just news and pursuits and recruiting and big challenges we have in different markets and so on and so forth. So we try to keep each other informed and involved.
So I think I'm facing some of the same challenges that Fred is, because I have a very similar role within my firm. But in addition to that, I would say that even though I've been in this profession for probably 30 years, there isn't something that I don't come across on a project that is something I've never encountered before. And it's absolutely amazing to me that I'm still needing to learn. And I think that's one of the most amazing things about this profession, is it's constantly evolving. You need to make sure that you remain relevant, you stay on top of things, understand what's innovative, what's out there, be able to promote that and to educate your clients, because they do look to us as thought leaders. It's important to make sure that you continue to educate yourself on an ongoing basis.
So I think it's important, whether it's at work or an outside of work event, to just take as many opportunities as you can, like learning opportunities, networking opportunities, just to get comfortable doing those things. Like you might come across something at work, like a task that you've never done before that someone might ask you to do. Like you might be nervous to do it, but the only way to get better at it is to try it and learn how to do it. And in terms of networking, I was like terrified of like networking when I first started, and like the more events you go to, the easier it is to talk to people and be comfortable talking in front of people and having conversations. So really just like embrace all those opportunities that you get, because it's important. It's the only way to get better.
Awesome. So I'm sure in the crowd today we have tons of different focuses and interests of where you want to specifically apply your interior design expertise. If we could go down the line and describe your area of expertise and what you're working on now that you're focusing on.
So we do primarily senior living, and senior living, it's really kind of it's like hospitality, residential, healthcare, all kind of mixed together. So we'll do like a full senior living community. It'll have like the resident rooms, the cafe, like the lobby areas, offices. It's really everything. So I'm just working on a few projects just around. There's some in Illinois, Tennessee, Arkansas, kind of scattered all over.
I work in healthcare, and it's primarily acute care and ambulatory. Right now, it's a really interesting time in the healthcare industry because, as most of you are familiar with, the Affordable Care Act, or also known as Obamacare, the impact to our clients and their business is changing dramatically. So there are a lot of new models emerging in terms of how we approach design, a lot of other types of projects being built, but we're working on some pretty fascinating ambulatory type facilities around the country, and I'm always really interested in seeing the differences between different regions around the country and other parts of the world, and how the different models of care are emerging from all of those that kind of begin to inform each of the others.
My personal focus in my career development, I came up the path not so much as a designer, but as a programmer and strategic planner. So my emphasis was basically on pre-design, and has historically been my focus or my strong suit, not in terms of concept. And just to amplify that point one bit, I'm still basically mad at my architecture school for not explaining that there are lots of jobs in the profession, and that you come through design school training you to be the design director of a firm. Well, only one person gets to be the design director, so what is everybody else supposed to do? And in fact, there's lots and lots of jobs. You can be a programmer, you can be a spec writer, you can be a field technician, you can be, you can specialize in rendering or programming or detailing, or you can be in marketing, or you can be in lots of different, there's lots of jobs on an aircraft carrier. And our educational system doesn't really do a good job of painting that picture. So if you, for instance, feel like you can tell already you're not going to be the design director, don't despair. There's lots of choices out there in the profession.
I work primarily in workplace design, and I think it was something that coming out of school wasn't necessarily the glittery, showy, exciting part to say you want to go into corporate or workplace design, but I've really, really enjoyed it. I think that with each kind of design you get into, there's such a science behind it, and I think that's with any kind, but I've really found a passion for, with workplace design, this just the science behind watching the way people work and how much that environment can change the way they can work and the way they'll work as a team, and creating environments. We are at work a lot, and our lives are short, and we should be in places that make us happy and healthy. And so I have really, really just enjoyed learning about how much the workplace is changing and how it will keep changing. And so I think don't think that corporate work is boring work. It's a fun one.
And you reminded me of a question I was asked actually in Texas when I was doing a presentation for IIDA. A person in the crowd asked me, what is a bulletproof argument for interior design, or to advocate interior design? So I wanted to ask, I didn't want to ask you that question, but I want to ask you just a gentler question about it. What to you personally, what is the value of interior design? Alyssa, you touched on that it affects people, it affects how we behave in space. In your personal opinion, what is the most significant part about interior design?
I think interior design to me is most successful when it really is, when you keep coming back to the person that will be there, the person that's experiencing that space, and that it is a comfortable environment for them, that it's a safe environment for them. I think when you're just thinking about the way it looks and not the way it's really going to be for that person, it's not successful. So I think that interior designers that really focus on that user are so valuable and bring so much that I think that's to me the most important part.
Great answer.
I bet we're going to all say the same thing, and that is that it's about people. And you know, I'll just go back to what defines a profession. Typically is some additional education, some form of state licensure or registration, and that at its core of a profession is an altruistic mission. And whether it's saving lives or administering justice, or in our case, designing environments that people are going to live and learn and work and heal and those kinds of things. So serving people and making it also groovy in the meantime, but serving people is why we do what we do.
I think that what we do really impacts the health, safety, and welfare of the public. That's a really important aspect, I think, when many people think that interior designers only select pretty colors. What we do has a profound impact on people in their environment. And in healthcare in particular, there is a lot of evidence that's pointing to the impact that the built environment has on people in terms of healing. And that's such a profound statement to be made about what we do and how we can absolutely impact individuals when they're at their most vulnerable.
I also think it's about creating an experience like for the users also. I mean, you want it to be functional, and what she said about healing I think is really important as well. But I think it's just overall creating a good experience for the users that are in the space.
Fred, you're exactly right. You guys, the one tie that you guys all said, I think summing it down to one word is people. Interior design is about people. We impact people's lives every day, and that's, I think, the key value to understand about interior design, which I think is, in a way, a bulletproof argument for it. I'm going to ask just a couple more questions before we open it up to you guys for any question and answer that you have for our panel here today. One of the last questions I'll ask you is, professionally, what is one thing you wish you knew more about? And this can go beyond design. It doesn't have to be design focused, but what is one thing that you wish you knew more about?
I don't know. Personally, I guess I wish I knew more about art. I think that's important in terms of design, but also just general knowledge. And there are a lot of classes that you can take in school to learn about that. So I kind of wish maybe I would have taken a couple more art classes.
I think there's probably a couple things. Certainly in terms of just healthcare in particular, I wish I knew more about just the real detailed ins and outs about hospitals and how they function and certain aspects of clinical procedures and things such as that. The other thing I wish I had taken more classes and knew formally a lot more about just more about how people are impacted by their environment and just the actual study behind some of that.
Just for me personally, I came down the trail, as I mentioned earlier, in focusing on pre-design. I didn't do my years on the CDs. So I wish I knew more. I personally wish I knew more about construction, because I've been often caught flat-footed by a question that I had to defer to others. So that's just a personal flat spot.
For me, it would be business. I think the more and more I grow in a firm and become more invested in it, I think, and the more I'm brought to the conversation is when we're talking about billing, staffing, finances, profitability, looking at a lot of that. I think to have I wish that I had taken, accounting 101, finance 101, just these really basic fundamentals in school, because I think it's something that will make you such will make me a more rounded person, or more well-rounded person, to have some of those understanding. Because I think also in workplace, that's something that my clients are dealing with. I mean, we're talking about their budget and they're looking at the way they're financing projects, and I think the more I would have an understanding of the business side, I would also understand their business side and their things they're worried about, that kind of thing.
Absolutely, and that ties in wonderfully back to our original, one of our first questions, which was being about a generalist, embracing that expansive experience that you might have in another career or what you dabble in school. Those things can contribute to it. I know one thing that I wish I knew more about was, and this is something that you kind of touched on about people, psychology. That I would love if I knew more about psychology, just to know how people's minds work, how we process things. I think that's just invaluable for interior design. The last question I'll ask is, at any level in your IIDA membership, going from a student to an associate member to a professional individual membership, what has been the value of IIDA throughout that time? And I know each of you have different memberships at that time, but at any stage, how has IIDA helped or contribute to your career?
I think, you know, in IIDA, you will get into it, or you'll get out of it what you put into it. I think when all you do is sign up for a membership, then honestly, you're probably not going to get a lot out of being a member. It's when you are attending things, like you're here today. I think it's when you're engaged, you're attending things, you're reading, you know, Design Matters and the things that they are going to the work to publish. I think that's why you're a part of an organization like this. And so I think put in the time and the commitment to it, and it will come back tenfold. That I think it's been, yeah, I could keep rambling about IIDA.
I agree, you get out of it what you put into it, certainly valuable for training and information, news sharing, etc. But fundamentally, it's the single thing that will unite everybody in this room, because we will all end up working at different firms. And so the one single thing that we can all listen to the same music, if you will, is coming from the professional association. So it's a unifying thread.
I would say that the networking opportunities that are provided through organizations such as IIDA are really important, and the continuing education opportunities that come forward. And then I would say that as my profession has evolved, being able to be given opportunities such as this, to be participating on a panel, being asked to do this type of thing is really a great thing for your career, to get yourself your own kind of PR out there. Organizations like IIDA are really great and invaluable at that aspect as well.
I've had the opportunity to participate on planning committees for the Chicago City Center, planning events like Stitch, for example, and that's really fun. I like being able to work with other designers from other firms, like you're all together in IIDA, and then you can work together to plan events, and it's a great way to meet people, and it's a lot of fun too.
Awesome. All right, now I'm going to open it up to you guys with any questions. I'm going to come out into the audience, channel my inner Oprah, and come out to you. And you get a car, and you get a car. So if anybody has any questions, just raise your hand, and I'll try to find you behind the pillars and everything. Yes, we'll go back to you first.
Hi, good morning. My name is Tara Headley. I'm an MFA graduate student at Savannah College of Art and Design, and I also have my BFA in interior design as well. And one of the things I've found recently in grad school is that we do a lot of research and implement a lot of theories of interior design, like biophilia, biomimicry, such. And I was wondering, how important is the implementation of theories and research in your respective firms?
I think bringing research into practice is incredibly important. Every time that we're in front of a client trying to explain to them why we're approaching a design from a certain perspective, they want to understand what's the rationale behind that. There needs to be really strong reasons for that. Particularly when you're trying to promote an idea that might be new to them, it's a very, very good way to put that out there. So we try to do as much research internally as we can and rely on other research that's available to inform us about why we need to approach a project in a certain way.
I would just echo that and say that my own training, my master's degree is in architecture, but it was in environment behavior research. So I was trained as a researcher and basically felt like a tall dog in short grass my whole career, because the thing I was interested in didn't really have a lot of traction until recently. And so there's a lot more emphasis on research now than ever in my career. So I think you're on a good page, and I think it's a good background to have.
We had one more question back here. Who was it? Yes.
Hello, my name is Ashley Romano. I'm currently a student, and I'm working at a kitchen and bath studio. I want to go back to what you said about like when you're standing there making copies, how you deal with negativity. What's like something that you use as a reminder to stay positive and keep moving forward?
I think there's a couple different ways to look at that. I think one way to stay positive, I mean, we're very lucky. You're in a career you're excited about, in in an environment you're excited about, and I think when there are negative things like that, you just gotta cordially, walk away from it as much as you can. I think that it's just a matter of keeping perspective that we're very lucky to do what we do, and bigger picture of the world. I mean, you're in a job, you're safe, so I think just keeping that perspective and knowing that bigger picture, what's going to make a difference, and am I keeping moving forward in the right direction with what I'm doing, what's my attitude right now, is that moving in the right direction?
And to just take a longer time frame for perspective. Sure, you're making copies today, and maybe you end up making copies again tomorrow. Well, if you're early in your career and that's what needs to be done, and making copies is a silly example, but if you're doing a mundane task, but if you find yourself recognized in the arc of your career, you're at the very first part, of course you're going to be doing mundane tasks. If you find yourself doing that 10 years later, then something's wrong. So, but recognize, in the arc of your career, what is a realistic time frame, and to try to stay positive in that regard.
Sonia, your hand in front. There we go.
Hello, rough voice, but my name is Mandy Walker, and this is Kira Miller, and we're both recent May graduates from Indiana University, Purdue University, and we're both interested in transplanting to other cities. We have connections, we've networked within our city, but how do you take that first step when you're trying to go cross-country and you don't have a connection, you don't know anyone, you don't know how to get your foot in the door in a new city? What's your go-to, your first step?
Well, I'll just add one thing and let others take a run at it, but it's very hard to interview consecutively in the city if you don't live there. So you kind of have to, if you want to be in New York City, or you want to be in Chicago, or wherever it is, you kind of got to get yourself to Chicago. And how you do that, I don't know. But it's very difficult to successfully interview at multiple firms if you're in some other place. So.
I've transplanted myself twice in my career. When I first graduated from college, I moved from Knoxville to Baltimore. And I didn't know a soul in Baltimore, and it was very, very difficult because honestly I didn't know what to do. I was able to get interviews and get an internship after graduation, so that helped me get a foot in the door. But I think and then when I moved from Baltimore to Chicago, I relied on my network in Baltimore. The sales reps that work for manufacturers were awesome in giving me ideas about who to connect with. They connected me with their counterparts in Chicago, and I was able to sit down with them and try to understand the lay of the land and what to do and where to go. So I think if you do have any connections where you are today, even as a student, a lot of times you may see sales people coming into this college or whatever. I'd try to tap into them and talk to them a little bit about what they know about a city you're interested in.
Great. And questions over here? I'll go over here.
My name's Lauren Johns. I'm a student at Indiana Wesleyan University. And my question is maybe a little twofold. But when we were talking about portfolios, resumes, the things that you're sending in, is there a preferred format that you receive those? And then you had mentioned about the hand drawings, how that was something that you could look at and kind of get an idea of that person, and how that's maybe not as relevant anymore. What is relevant, perhaps? Like, what draws your eye on a resume or a portfolio that would be important to put time into?
Go ahead. Okay.
I think format-wise, I think PDFs, electronic, is probably the way that they stay the most organized for us. I think don't send a resume in Microsoft Word. That's a pet peeve of mine. It just looks like it's not finished. Just print it as a PDF and then send it over. I think what is relevant, I think students today have this amazing tool of this 3D software where really quickly you can build a rendering that would have taken weeks and weeks previously, but it's almost becoming so reliant on that I think I like to see that process still. I think including in your resume, showing that you still know how to, that the first step you took in a project wasn't to start building it in Revit and looking at it in 3D that way, that the first step you took was, even if it's not sketching perspectives, but bubble diagrams and looking at processes that way. And so I think just showing how you got to this rendering is really important, and I think that's something that I want to know, that you're not completely reliant on that software and that you still have the ability to think through it that way.
And I think those process diagrams are great, but mostly in an interview where you can talk a little bit more about your work. If it's an electronic document that's our first glance, I would probably keep that, personally vote for keeping that a little bit cleaner and a little bit tighter. Definitely a link to a website or a PDF, but not a disk. Some people will send a disk or whatever, or a thumb drive. We don't want to put those things in our computers, and we're just not going to take the time. So.
I would agree. I think a link to a website or even just a PDF with some sample projects is fine as an intro.
I've seen it where you can just put together like a page or two that just show some of your best work and then just submit that like a PDF. So, or just have a website.
Great. I'll take 2 more questions before we depart for career exchange.
As a prospective senior, I'm looking for an internship and somewhere to start my career. I am from the Chicagoland area. I'm just wondering if what I'm learning here in the Chicagoland Northwest suburb area or Northwest area is the same as if I'm looking on the East Coast or West Coast, if my education will be in use over there, or if they're looking for different types of education. Just wondering if my education in the Northwest area is going to be in use and in demand on the East Coast or West Coast if I'm looking to start a career somewhere else.
I think that it's all very transferable. I mean, most accredited programs are following pretty much the same IIDA guidelines for what's being taught. So there's a bit of a standardization amongst programs. Sometimes I think it's really nice to see a resume or portfolio from someone from a different part of the country, because there may be something out there that we may not be exposed to by just our own region. So I wouldn't feel held back by that in any way.
So one more, I'll do your phone. Thanks.
Hi, my name's Kira, and I'm also a recent graduate, as Mandy told you. And I was wondering, we were talking about the portfolios and making sure that your best work is in it. And I was wondering if you should still show diversity in your programs or your hand drawings, even if some of your skills are better than others. Like, is it more important to show the diversity, or is it more important to show your best if it's all in one software or 2 softwares?
I would say that you're probably better off not being just single-faceted. I would show a little bit of everything if it's possible to do.
And a lot of times people will put at the back of their portfolio like their artwork, sketches or pictures made stained glass or whatever. That's always good to show and rounds a person out, and we see that you have an artistic bent. We're not hiring you to make stained glass, but it lets us know a little bit more about you. So, yeah.
Anything to add, Alyssa?
No, I mean, I would agree. I think that I think diversity is important, because, like I was saying, I think if I see that all you have is these Revit, 3D renderings, it doesn't make it look like you are very well-rounded, I guess.
Thank you guys so much. Can we give a round of applause for our wonderful panelists today? Thank you guys for taking the time out of your workday to come here. We really appreciate it. You guys were wonderful. Just 2 things real quick. One, the IIDA Student Design Charrette, People's Choice, is located out in that front little lobby area where you can vote on the charrette projects that were created yesterday. Their design problem was that they needed to recreate or remake the Merchandise Mart cafeteria or food court area that had some transit parts of it too, which is a pretty cool design problem to do. So go over there and see their results and vote for which is your favorite. And next up is the ASID Career Exchange. Thank you guys all for coming. We appreciate it. Hope you learned a lot. Thank you.